Hello, and welcome to the most recent episode in our interview series on the future of English language teaching. These interviews are being uploaded weekly on our website, through our Facebook page, and on YouTube. If you'd like to comment on these interviews, please do. We'd welcome any feedback that you have, and any questions that you have will be fed into future interviews. This interview is with ASalama, who teaches English for academic and other specific purposes in Egypt at Nile University and part-time at the American University in Cairo. She's a researcher and teacher trainer focusing on teacher leadership. Amira is a past president of Nile TESOL, the local Egypt TESOL affiliate, and is currently the vice president of Africa TESOL. So Amira, what's the current COVID situation in Egypt?
Oh, yeah. Well, now actually I think it is stable because over the last few weeks, the cases have been decreasing as per the announced numbers. But I'm not sure what is happening next, actually, because there are speculations that we are going to have a second wave soon. Especially that people here are starting to loosen the different measures that they are taking. So people are back to work as normal. I think this is a situation everywhere now. And there are like plans about starting the new school year as normal as well in some places. So I'm not sure. It's really unpredictable.
And when you say starting the new school year as normal, is it going to be face-to-face, or is it going to be a hybrid system where some people are online and some people are face-to-face? What's happening in your institution?
It is the same situation like COVID, unpredictable and not really certain, because we usually hear like in Egypt, or I would say in the Middle East in general, we just get the news few minutes before it's supposed to be happening. So in my institution, for example, we don't know whether we are going to go to face-to-face or just like do blended or do entirely on online semester. This news has not been communicated to us yet. There are like some private institutions in Egypt, like the American University in Cairo. I work part-time there as well. And they decided that they are going to go entirely online for the new semester. But this is one institution in Egypt. We are not sure about the rest.
And what happened last term? Did you move to online teaching in the middle of last term?
Yes, yeah, we did move to online teaching, and it was done like suddenly, like it was happening everywhere else. In my institution, we took a break of 2 weeks, and then we were back to a very brief tech orientation to how to record the presentation, how to use the online platform. That was very brief, and then we started online teaching. In other schools in Egypt, the situation is different because at schools, they had to end the semester in March. So there was no teaching happening. They also had to revamp the online assessment tools. So students were not taking exams, they were doing projects and they were assessed accordingly. And this was a brand new way of assessment in Egypt, because our education system is test driven. And students are not really acquainted with the idea of working in groups or doing projects. This is really a new idea for them, especially at the level.
They had to deal with the move online and project-based learning being introduced as completely new ideas.
It's not really learning, Alan. It is assessment. So project assessment. Their students were not really given input on project-based learning or like how to do projects. But the project that they were asked to do actually were based on the learning outcomes from the curriculum. So they were not really new ideas. But the fact that they had to be assessed based on a project that they would submit was the shift in the assessment system.
And did you notice any differences in what and how they learned as a result of that?
Well, I don't teach at schools, but I teach at undergrads. And in my institution, many of my students actually were reluctant to our online classes. and many of them were not in favor of actually taking online classes because they talked about the idea of the importance of face-to-face interaction, of the teacher being there physically. And the online education, I would say in Egypt, is not really that common. So people, when they think of a degree or studying, they prefer to go attend the classes, even if this would be on the expenses of them traveling from one city to another. So it's a new idea still, and a lot of like students were reluctant to be involved in online classes. But then when we had to, because a lot of like teaching in the past semester actually included a lot of like emotional support that we were providing as teacher to the students. I had a lot of like meetings with my students to tell them like this is really not permanent and this is only one semester, and we had all to work together, like giving a lot of reassurances to them to pass this difficult period.
And do you actually think that's the case? Do you think this is going to be a one-time thing, or do you think this is going to fundamentally change the way we do things from now on?
I do think that it will actually change a lot of things, especially in our context here, because online platforms or digital like tools in education were not used extensively before. I think now teachers are pushed to learn how to use these online platforms and how to be involved in online teaching. And I think this is gonna be like one component of teacher training in the future, especially with dealing with these crisis situations that we are in. And for schools, I was talking about higher ed at the higher ed level, but for schools, I think the change might be not as drastic as it would be in private institutions or at universities, but there can be something to be done in terms of equipping teachers and qualifying them more for teaching online in the future if the need arises.
What do you see is going to be the difference between the private institutions and the state institutions?
Talking about private and state institutions is really something that is, I would say, like it's contrasting two ends, because private institutions in Egypt, especially universities, for example, they have the luxury to have their own policies. My institution, for example, is all based on research and digital learning, even before that pandemic. So shifting online was not difficult, and also doing classes and teaching online for the faculty was not that difficult. Students as well come from a certain social class, so they don't have these equity issues. But I think when it comes to schools, the situation is different, especially state schools, because students come from a different social class. There are equity issues, there are access to technology issues that they have to deal with. That's why the decision to end the term last semester in the middle, I think, was a wise decision to avoid dealing with these equity issues, because we cannot provide connectivity to all the students across Egypt.
Right. So the main strategy there was avoidance.
Yes, exactly. And this affected the students actually and their learning, because this was cut, like the term was cut in the middle, and there were skills that they didn't learn actually. But there were talks and plans that maybe in the following years, especially for students who are young, this can be compensated for.
In what kind of way?
Maybe integrating the skills that were not taught last semester in the curriculum for the following years, so students would not miss out like on these skills.
Okay, so is there a sense that the Ministry of Education is taking a bit of a breather to be able to prepare itself for next term? Are there going to be distribution of devices that students can use for online learning, or do you think that they're just hoping it'll all go away and they can restart the semester as usual in September?
Yeah, actually, before the pandemic, there was a very promising plan for the Ministry of Education here to integrate technology in the curriculum, and they were planning to give tablets and computers to students in state schools, and started already doing this in different grades. And that was a very promising plan for education in Egypt. And then when the pandemic started, the situation was not really that stable, and still the plan was in progress. So they couldn't actually accommodate all the students because of the connectivity issues and because of the lack of infrastructure in some schools to accommodate technology. So they had to cut it in the middle. But I think in the next semester, the situation will be better because there are plans about using blended learning, especially in the state schools where students, not all the students have access to technology, so they would have access to the teacher. And there were like some ideas about maybe students going to school for 2 days, and the rest of the week they will be giving classes online. And some actually in the doing also the project assessment last semester, not all the students had to submit their projects online. There was an option for some of the students who did not have access to technology to go to their schools and hand in their projects at their schools. So I think there are ideas and plans for the future to accommodate all the students with all the challenges we have in this context. And I hope it will be better next semester.
Right. So there's been a range of different responses to the situation there. Are there any other examples that you've seen of good practice?
Talking about Egypt, I would say that the best practices I have seen so far are from teachers themselves and from the teacher association in Egypt, which is Nile TESOL. Because they have been organizing a lot of like professional development events for teachers since the pandemic started, not only to talk about how to teach online or how to use Zoom or any different platform, but also to allow teachers a chance to vent and to talk about how they are feeling during these times. Because we have been suffering like for a long time from the idea that policies and rules and decisions are taken top down here, especially when it comes to education. But I think with this situation, and where teachers are the ones who have been left sometimes with no training at all to deal with it with their students, teachers have demonstrated that they are the ones leading this change, or the ones who are keeping learning happening actually. So the best practices I have seen are the practices of teachers, especially when it comes to teacher education practices in my community.
When you say that teachers are leading, what can you give me some concrete examples of that?
Yeah, because I have contacts with teachers in schools, and they talked to me about also the challenge they face, especially in state schools, when sometimes they are teaching in an area that is remote from Cairo. They don't get the same access to maybe the digital platform the ministry is providing for teachers to receive the project assessment or the project that students are sending. So teachers have started their own kind of, I would say, PLNs, where they are sharing ideas with each other about how to assess the projects, how to talk to the students about ways of doing the projects. They are doing their own kind of professional development among themselves, using sometimes Facebook, using sometimes WhatsApp, away from the formal channels of communication that the ministry would have with them. So forming these very specific circles of teacher development or teacher support groups, I think has been very fascinating.
Interesting. So these teacher support groups, they're self-sustaining, they're run by teachers, there's no ministry intervention at all?
Exactly, yes, they are run by teachers, and teachers, maybe if a teacher gets like some kind of information about something, he would send it to the other teacher. They start discussing it, they start discussing the rubric, they start discussing how they could assess the students using these kinds of new assessment that they are also introduced to as teachers. So forming these or starting these discussions, I think, are very healthy. Especially teachers feel that they are connected, they are supported, they are not isolated, even if they are staying home and away from school.
It's interesting going back to this idea of project-based assessment. I mean, that's quite a revolution in the form of assessment that you have in Cairo. Your traditionally paper-based tests, multi-choice or open answers generally, or a mixture of both?
Well, it's actually for tests, they are mostly MCQ. Sometimes there are essay questions, but usually they are, I would say, prescribed. So students are not really given that room for like creativity and expressing themselves freely. Actually, at my university, when students come to my university after high school, some of them struggle to write essays where they express their opinions, where they just like think out of the box. We have to spend a lot of time at the beginning of the semester for them to learn how to just be free in thinking and writing and expressing themselves, because they were taught in a system that is very test driven, that you really take the skills that would enable you to pass this exam. Also, getting admitted into college depends highly on the score that you get at high school, which is based mainly on the test that you take as a high school student. So it's very heavy on tests and exams. And when students reach the college and they start learning about project-based learning and working in groups and all of these new ideas in that context, it becomes very challenging. And
So
actually,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. And actually, the new curriculum that I was talking about, and the new plan for reform in education that was introduced before, had this idea that students from grade 1 would actually be introduced to project-based learning in grade 1 and 2 and 3, actually. And this has been like a plan that started a few years ago, but as I said, it is still in progress, and it wouldn't reap the seeds now, actually. We still have to wait.
But the assessment system has changed to project-based assessment, and so what does an assessment task look like now?
So students were asked to do research on a topic that they have taken, let's say in science. They would do research about this topic, online research, where they have to meet certain outcomes to demonstrate that they know about these definitions or these this terminology in science, for example. So it was basically like that in most of the subjects. Doing research about a certain concept or a certain definition, and then submitting this.
So that sounds to me like the tasks are very open, that they can choose their own topics, that they can choose their own research methods, that they can decide what their focus is going to be, and they can write about what they want based on the parameters of the task.
Yeah, that's true, Alan. And also because it was first time introduced, it was not really very structured, I would say. So there were no high expectations that they would really think about the research methods and all of the tools involved in doing research that you would require from someone who really knows the skills about doing research. I would say it was a way for the Ministry of Education to end the semester and provide a kind of assessment that would enable students to present something to demonstrate that they have learned about the things that they were taught during the semester. But it was not really, I would say it was not the best. It was not the best solution, I would say.
They're also doing this as a group.
Yeah, they had the option to do it individually or in groups. And again, because the idea of working in groups is new, many students were not really in favor of doing it in groups. I have my cousins who were telling me about their experience. They were students at schools, and they were telling me that they could not really work in groups. They prefer to do it individually.
Do they work in groups and then submit their papers individually, or do they submit a group paper?
Yeah, they work in groups, and then one of the group members would submit it on their name.
One of the group members.
Yes.
So how do you know who did what work?
The project would have the name of the students, and usually with their seat number and I think codes that they use at school. So it is, and they would submit it sometimes online, or they would go to school to hand in their projects.
It sounds like a big change to the assessment system, and in my experience, changing the assessment system is how you change education, because despite our best efforts, teachers always teach to the test in some way, shape, or form. They want their students to get the best marks on the assessments, and so they prepare their students for dealing with the assessments and assessment tasks. So do you think this change in the assessment system is going to have a major impact on classroom teaching?
I do believe in that, and I was part of a teacher training when this new plan for revamping the curriculum started in Egypt a few years ago, and we were training teachers in different, coming from different governorates in Egypt to use the new curriculum that was mainly based on this project-based learning idea. And no surprise, we had some teachers who have been teaching for 30 years plus who were reluctant to this new education system, actually.
Teachers have been teaching for 30 years plus are always reluctant to change, in my experience.
Yes, and they were just like, we couldn't do that. Students will not really understand this way. And the idea of grammar translation and using just like teaching grammar explicitly were all ideas the teachers have been like following for years. So this new reform in education actually is, I would say, revolutionary, because it does not really comply to the same standards we had since years. But it introduces project-based learning, introduces a new assessment. Students until grade 4 actually are not given an exam. They are asked to do projects, and they would do these projects in teams. And the group work is integrated into the curriculum and the different tasks that they are given. So I would say this is a very promising plan for reforming education in Egypt.
It sounds like a very interesting way of changing the education system, and the washback effect on what will happen in classes could be quite phenomenal. But you do have to question the timing, don't you? In the middle of the biggest pandemic that we've had, the biggest disruption to education, to introduce a new assessment system seems like a bit of a step too far at the moment.
Exactly, and actually teacher training as well, because if you have the plan, if it is very promising, but then you don't have a teacher inside the classroom who is convinced or knows how to teach the lesson this way, it will be very challenging. So I think there is a lot of work to be done in this as well.
And I was just going to ask, you're a researcher yourself. Is there any research being done into the implementation of this new assessment system and how the students are dealing with it, what the teachers are doing to enable the students to cope with it? What kind of research projects are happening in that regard?
That's a very interesting question, because I think the research on the situation we are right now actually is still being a work in progress. Because we have a lot of research done here about how teachers think about the assessment system in education, how they feel about it, how the parents as well also feel about it. But about the new one, from the reactions I got from teachers and also students, it is still challenging. And I would say the research to be done in this topic would be very interesting to explore, actually. I'm sure there is research being done right now or have been done in the past semester to explore how teachers and students feel about it. But I would say from experience that we had some resistance from both teachers and parents to comply with the new assessment method, and to also introduce the change in education that I mentioned before. There were always reluctance due to different reasons.
Hmm. And the assessment system, presumably this is only hitting the students who are in the higher grades, the ones who are taking exams for leaving school and major gatekeeping exams. But what about the lower grades? What's happened to those students in this time?
No, actually, it is the opposite. So
Ah,
students who are in lower grades are given the project assessment, but
ah,
students
okay.
who are leaving high school, they had to take the exams at schools. And this happened last month, actually.
So the
Uh,
education system doesn't have that much faith in project-based exam assessment.
Not yet, yeah, I would say not yet, because high school exams is a high stakes exam, and
Mm.
you wouldn't imagine how much it is important here in Egypt for parents, students. It's like a dilemma, I would say. So revamping this and starting something new takes, I would say, will take a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Well, in the UK, they abandoned the exams this year. We didn't have any exams for O levels or A levels. What they've done is predicted the grades that the students would get based on teacher assessments. But that hasn't
Mm.
gone so well. Scotland announced their results a couple of weeks ago, and there was a great outcry by students at how they felt that their results were being underestimated. The formula, the algorithm that they used, the education ministry used, seemed to disfavor students who were in lower socioeconomic areas. Um, how has Egypt actually had those exams, and how did you do that in the lockdown situation?
Talking about the high school exams, they were
Mm.
done at schools, and it's easy to do this because it has been done like this for years. Students were asked to go to school on certain days to take the exams. There were a lot of like students who were reluctant, I would say, to go during COVID-19, especially that
Mm.
last month we had a lot of cases and it was not really safe. But the ministry assured them that there will be precautionary measures and everything will be like equipped for them to go. And it was risky, but I would say we wouldn't have risk like doing it online, especially this is a high stakes exam. And I would say students and teachers were not prepared for this new kind of assessment in this at this level, I would say. So I think it was the best solution for the time, but I agree that in the future there should be other ways of doing this high-stake exam. And I think with this, within this reform, education reform plan, there is an idea to change the high school exams, especially the students at this stage. Also, they study for the tests to get admitted into college. I think there is an idea to change this as well and introduce a new kind of assessment.
Okay, great. Um, Now, you're also vice president of Africa TESOL. So you must have contact with teacher associations in other countries. In North Africa, in the neighboring countries around Egypt, has the situation been similar, or have you seen different responses to the COVID crisis?
Well, in Africa TESOL, we have most of the affiliates in West Africa, and the ones we have in North Africa are TESOL Sudan and Morocco, Laayoune chapter. And in terms of Morocco, I have been following their events and their professional development webinars. They are very active, and when I went there actually last year, I saw how active the teachers are. Informing their professional learning networks and in doing their teacher support groups as well. And for the newsletter we had in Africa TESOL this summer, we had also stories from teachers across Africa talking about their experience teaching and also getting teacher training during the pandemic, and highlighting the one theme that it's all about teachers supporting each other actually. And the role of teacher associations in delivering online webinars for their teachers and reaching out to them through different ways has been very phenomenal, I would say. Especially in Africa, the situation might be different from other places because of the equity issues, because of the infrastructure, because of the lack of connectivity. Teachers and many schools had to keep communication with their students through WhatsApp, sometimes through radio lessons and TV lessons, because they didn't have access to online platforms. So it was a very challenging situation, but the stories I'm hearing from teachers through our events at Africa TESOL and also through the newsletter are very, I would say, very motivating and inspiring.
Can you share with us one of those more inspiring stories?
Yeah, we had a series of Africa TESOL webinars during COVID-19 for teachers to share what they have been doing with their students. And we had a teacher from Cameroon, for example, and she was sharing her experience keeping in touch with her students through WhatsApp, sending them lessons on WhatsApp, and then they would reply to her messages by doing the task or by asking questions all through WhatsApp, because they didn't have access to other online platforms to give lessons, full-fledged lessons. We also had teachers talking about the radio lessons, that they would record their lessons through radio, and then students would listen to these radio lessons at their leisure, especially in places where they don't have access to, again, internet. So it was all about teachers extending or going the extra mile to communicate with their students in places where like the semester was still running, because in some countries the semester ended, like in Egypt, but in other countries it was still going on. So teachers had to find ways to communicate with their students during this time.
Great. And Africa TESOL's been running a series of webinars also, hasn't it?
Exactly, yeah. We have been running a series of webinars during April and May, especially with the theme of supporting teachers during COVID-19. It was mainly for them to come to our platform and talk about their experiences. And we had mainly classroom teachers sharing their experiences. And we also organized the Centric ELT webinar series that was in June to support teacher associations in their attempt to help and support teachers during the pandemic and also beyond. And we are doing the Africa TESOL Symposium where we are highlighting also stories of African teachers and how they have dealt with the pandemic and the different challenges in teacher training during that period.
Great. Well, I'm going to talk to the president, Ayman, after the weekend, after the seminar has completed. So we'll find out how that went next week. But until then, the Africa TESOL, have you any indication of what kind of response the webinars have had? How have the members responded to those webinars? Have they told you how useful they were, or given you any indication about how they've changed things as a result of the webinars?
Well, we had teachers responding to our webinars after they were recorded, because usually we record the webinars and we post them on YouTube, and they are also posted on our Facebook. We had teachers responding and replying that this was a good idea, or this was a good event to attend. But I would say that the impact of not only the Africa TESOL webinars, but also I was talking about this the other day with a colleague, the idea of, we have a surge of webinars about teachers teaching during this time, actually. And what I would recommend that we do is provide more room for teachers to express their thoughts and what they have been doing, because I believe we can learn a lot from teachers during this time. I myself, when I was teaching during that semester, I was not really getting all the instructions about what I should be doing from the administration or from my school. but there are a lot of things that I had to figure out myself. And sharing this with other teachers in my department or with other teachers in my teacher association was very inspiring. So giving room for teachers to express their thoughts and share what they have been doing during this time, I think is something that we should be doing more, especially with the idea that we want to enable teachers to be leaders and to be leading the way of change when it comes to education reform. I think there is a lot to learn from teachers, especially during this pandemic time, for change to be bottom up. I believe we need to provide more webinars, more events, more conferences where teachers are talking instead of us telling them what to do. So the one idea we had at Africa TESOL was to organize this series of webinars during April and May, where we had those teachers coming to just talk about their experiences. They're saying that organizing those webinars at Africa TESOL was like a message that we wanted to deliver. The teachers' voices should be heard during that pandemic.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great note to end on. So thanks very much, Amira. That's very, very inspiring.
Thank you, Alan. And I hope that the ideas that we shared today will be helpful for others to watch as well.
I'm sure they will be. Thank you.
Thank you.